There's quite an interesting quote in terms of accelerating your timelines by Elon Musk. He said, if you give yourself 30 days to clean your home, it will take you 30 days. But if you give yourself 3 hours, it will take 3 hours. The same applies to your goals, ambitions, and potential. Yo, Zenith Nation, welcome back to Catch The Zenith, the podcast where I document my journey to get better in life and business. Today we've got another episode of Zenith Reflections where I comment on some of my most interesting posts from the week on X, formerly known as Twitter. And by the way, if you're new here to this podcast, I'm Nicola, I'm an entrepreneur and master student, so please share and enjoy. The first thing I want to share with you is a post about Elon Musk's framework to improve anything. It's a post I came across, it's one of Alex Hormozi. He basically attempted to break down how Elon Musk is improving stuff in business. And interestingly, Hormozi also then created a framework how to improve anything in life. So let me go through it. So let's start with a quick example or story. Let's imagine you're running a small business, maybe a local online store. And sales are pretty decent, but you're feeling overwhelmed and things aren't scaling as you hoped. Now the question, what would Elon Musk suggest you do? From my perspective, first, question your goals. Why exactly are you running this business? Is it to create financial freedom, build something meaningful, or just pay the bills? So you get clear about the why. And then second, you delete unnecessary tasks. So you ask yourself, are there things you're doing just because everyone else does? And maybe you're managing multiple social media accounts that bring no meaningful results or offering products that don't sell well. So cut those out immediately. Now, third, you optimize. So you find what's already working well and you double down on it. If one product sells particularly well, you focus more resources on promoting that. If email marketing brings great returns, invest in improving those campaigns. So you double down on what works basically. And then fourth, and that's an important one, you accelerate your timelines. So you ask yourself how you could achieve your current goals in a fraction of the time. Perhaps you could automate parts of your sales process, you outsource routine tasks, or implement better software to speed things up significantly. There's quite an interesting quote in terms of accelerating your timelines by Elon Musk. He said, if you give yourself 30 days to clean your home, it will take you 30 days. But if you give yourself 3 hours, it will take 3 hours. The same applies to your goals, ambitions, and potential. Now, that what he said is basically referring to Parkinson's law from my perspective. What exactly Parkinson's law states? So Parkinson's law is the idea that work expands to fill the time available for its completion. Simply put, the more time I have, the longer it takes to do something. And I give you a quick example. I remember back in the days during my undergrad time, I had on some days, I had the entire day to just prepare for university, to work on some assignments or prepare PowerPoint presentations, go through the slides that the professor provided us with. So I had plenty of time. However, I had the entire day and I felt like I didn't get that much done compared to on days where I had another appointment. Because when I knew that, for instance, I will meet someone in the evening or I have simply I'm going to work out, I felt like kind of a pressure because I knew maybe I have 8, 9 or 10 hours time and after that I have an appointment. So it added a little bit of urgency because I set myself this artificial deadline. And that's the power of Parkinson's law, saying okay, normally I take for this amount of work 12 hours. However, because I have today this appointment, it will take only 8 hours. And I'm sure I can do that. And the interesting thing is really the quality is oftentimes pretty much the same, sometimes even better, because you have this sense of urgency and you want to make things right on the first go. I'm not saying always. Obviously, there is like a fine line between when quality starts to decline. So there is diminishing return and or utility for when you're going for a shorter deadline in some cases. But I think in most cases it's fair to say that you can do exactly the same just in less time, because you have this urgency, you act faster, your behavior is way faster basically. And I think Elon Musk is pretty good at doing this. So that was the fourth one. Accelerate your timelines. And then the final one is you automate. Once you've streamlined your operations, now circling back again to this business example from before, you streamlined your operations, delegated tasks, use automation tools, or hire help. Your business should eventually run efficiently without constant oversight, freeing your time for bigger opportunities. So the fifth one is basically you automate. Now, I tried to tell you this example, like a business example, applying this framework. Now let's go again through it, but more technically, like what are step 1 to 5. So the simple framework entails, first, you question the requirements. Why am I doing this? You remember, what is actually the goal with my business was the question in my example I provided you with. Second, you delete dumb requirements. So you cut out unnecessary tasks and distractions, because sometimes there are really things, should we really do them? Like, why are we doing them? Are they really contributing to the main North Star goal or mission or vision of our company or in general in our lives? And then the third, you optimize. You double down on what works. And that's, I think, a common thing that a lot of founders do, and sometimes I did, or I thought about doing similar things. Like, you have a running system. Like, for instance, back in the day when I was running my coaching business, I had like my main product, which was a scalable coaching product basically for high performers with ADHD. And sometimes I had some ideas, I could also do a second product. But I forgot that, I now found something that works, that I can sell repeatedly. So actually the better approach would be I first double down on this until it's maxed out. So I double down on my product that already works. I try to make it better. I try to sell more units of it. And if I have maxed out everything, maybe I could think about doing something new. But in most cases, I would argue that first doing more, doing better is a better pathway. Conversely, doing new is not that good, because if you do something new, you have so many new challenges. You don't know stuff, you need to figure out stuff. But if you have a running system, focus on that and try to do this one better. Because they're always like, it's a lot of people, and to a certain degree myself included, we love novelty, like this sparkle of doing something new. But then we forget about we already did something, and that's now running pretty well. So jumping around and losing focus can be, I think, detrimental to business success. All right. Then third, you optimize. You double down on what works, we said. Then fourth, you accelerate timelines. You do things faster. You remember the Parkinson's law. And then fifth, you automate. You make things run themselves. Like, for instance, in a business context, you could say like, okay, I hire certain people, and after a certain period, I have the oversight, but I'm not any more operationally involved in the day-to-day business. And that's the 5-step framework. Now, Hormozi, within his post, he beautifully summarized how this framework also applies to improving anything in life. So not only in business, but also in your private life, for instance. So first, you question why you should do stuff. Second, you delete dumb people and expectations. So you curate you end maybe friendships that are not really valuable, and you don't do stuff just to meet the expectations. There are so many social obligations that we think we need to obey to, like that we need to do in our lives, but we can question that and we can delete that to a certain degree because we are free human beings, obviously. So delete dumb people and expectations. And then third, you pursue the opportunity that gives you the highest return. So you optimize. And then fourth, see how you can do it in 1/10 the time. So you accelerate, you do things faster. And then fifth, get other people or things to keep pursuing those goals without you. So you automate. I would argue that that framework is super, super powerful, because if you think like, maybe let's try to do an example. Let's see how that goes. Let's assume you're currently cleaning your house all the time, but you have already a full-time job, you're earning great money. So you could question, why am I actually cleaning my house myself? I could earn way more per hour if I would delegate that, perhaps. So you question why you are doing stuff. And then second, you delete dumb people and expectations. So the expectation would be, in that case, like, I need to clean my house because if I give that task to someone else, I'm not really responsible and caring for my own household. And then third, you pursue the opportunity that gives you the highest return. So you optimize. So in terms of optimizing, you could argue that is a little bit related with the fifth one, automate. You could start hiring someone. So someone who is cleaning your house. So you pursue the opportunity that gives you the highest return. So you hire someone and you do your main job, and maybe you earn more power than actually if you would do that other activity, namely the cleaning your house. And then fourth, you see how you can do it in 1/10 of the time. Now, as the assumption would be like, if you still do it yourself, you could ask yourself, hey, can I do it faster? That would be like a accelerate timeline thing. And then lastly, you get other people or things keep pursuing those goals without you, so you hire someone. So I just think if for everything in life, to run through that framework is maybe something worth considering. I'm not saying that everywhere it's appropriate to do that or the best thing, but I think it's quite interesting. And also shout out to Alex Ramosi for capturing this framework perfectly. He basically tried to distill the gist of Elon Musk's productivity into this framework. So maybe it can help you as well. That was Elon Musk's framework. Hope it helps. Now, the next post I wanted to discuss from X was a post which I reposted on my X account by Kamal Ravikant. I think he's the brother of Naval Ravikant, the founder of AngelList. But correct me if I'm wrong. And he said 3 things in life: your health, your mission, and the people you love. That's it. And I really love the simplicity of that. So first, your health. You need to ensure that your mental, physical well-being is secured. Second, your mission. So you should pursue that thing that brings you meaning in life. At least that's my interpretation. And then the people you love. So great relationships. You have a house full of love, as Naval Ravikant used to say. And I think that's really cool. Because that is really referring to the basics in life. And successful people, what I've experienced, are never doing not the basics. They're always coming back to the basics, because most people are not doing the basics. They are thinking about the fancy stuff they could do. That sounds a little bit vague, so let me explain. Imagine the basics in terms of health are sleep, nutrition, and sport, like moving. And people sometimes think then more about, okay, in terms of thinking about cold showers and the perfect morning routine. And yeah, those things are all important, but just focusing on, do I sleep 8 hours per night at the same bed times, like 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 8 hours? Do I eat like unprocessed food maybe? like a proper diet, and do I work out maybe 4, 5, or 6 times per week? If I do that, that's already 80%. I think that's the basics, and everything on top of that, like taking cold showers, doing sauna, having the perfect morning routine, stuff like that, that's perfect. That's great. If it helps, of course, do whatever you want. I'm just saying what works for me. I'm also taking cold showers, quite frankly. But I'm just saying, like, that's just on top of that. That's bonus. And it's important to do the basics consistently because everything else will go way easier. And that's exactly what I like about Kamal's his post. Your health, your mission, and the people you love. And everything else is just distractions, basically. So, yeah, that's a great one. Next, this is a quote by Carl Jung, the, I think, psychologist or psychiatrist. He said, life really does begin at 40. Up until then, you are just doing research. And I very much love that because what I've learned from successful people is that in their 20s or even in their 30s, they are trying to learn as opposed to just earning. Like learn before earning. They want to acquire skills. They want to do research, basically. And later you can focus on earning good money and way more that you could do in the first place. But in the beginning, you want to explore stuff and get very good at some things. In my case, for instance, I set myself the goal to become very good in B2B SaaS sales. That's right now one of my goals. And that's part of the reason why I started, or I will start, a job as a sales development representative, an SDR, which is a fancy word for someone who just generates leads and basically like a setter, like to book demos with potential B2B clients. And I want to become very proficient in B2B SaaS sales. So that's something, this is the skill I want to acquire. And so I'm doing research, and I will soon graduate with my master's degree from the University of St. Gallen. And I could earn way more money if I go another path than the starter path. So if I would go the strategy consulting path, which is also interesting, consider that at one point in my life, I would obviously earn way more. Like if you work for, let's say, Boston Consulting Group or McKinsey, you earn, obviously, tendency is higher that you earn a lot of money compared to working in an early stage startup. The same is like, I think Robert Greene said something in a recent podcast episode, like in your 20s, you want to like learn. If you have the option to work in a startup where you can get a lot of experience as opposed to like an investment bank, always choose the startup. Or I think that's the better pathway to learn a lot. And I actually try to follow that and to acquire those skills, and later I can focus more on earning. But I think then I have those valuable skills that can get a high return on investment throughout my entire life. Circling back to the initial quote, life really does begin at 40. Up until then, you are just doing research, by Carl Jung. I think that's just brilliant. And now another post, which I reposted, was a quote by Fyodor Dostoevsky. I don't know that much about him, but a lot of people are referring to his books, and I maybe I should read those, but I came across this quote, and he wrote or said perhaps, a man who lies to himself and believes his own lies becomes unable to recognize truth, either in himself or in anyone else, and he ends up losing respect for himself and for others. When he has no respect for anyone, he can no longer love, and in order to divert himself, having no love in him, he yields to his impulses, indulges in the lowest forms of pleasure, and behaves in the end like an animal. And it all comes from lying to others and to yourself. Very much love this quote. Part of the reason is there is also this rule by Jordan B. Peterson: speak the truth, or at least don't lie. And I think that's one of the rules I try to follow in my life, which is sometimes pretty hard because telling the truth means also, to a certain degree, speaking up for yourself and saying what you think. And the truth is not always pleasurable, but short-term wise, it can cause some discomfort, but long-term wise, it's, from my perspective, the way more sustainable approach to when going through life. And I think Dostoevsky said, if you lying to yourself, you start after a certain period to believe those lies. And that happened to myself, if I remember back in the days when I was younger. Like, you start believing really those lies that you told. And another thing is, I think your self-worth also keeps track of that. Like, if you constantly lie and you also betray yourself, or you lie to yourself, for instance, you said, I will do X, and you don't do it, and you do that over and over and over again, your self-worth, your self-esteem will really go down, and the levels will decrease of it. And I think because of that, it's so important to speak the truth, or at least don't lie. Because, yeah, why? Because at least don't lie, because the truth, what do you know what is the truth in the end? It's your truth. But that's already a good starting point. Like, at least you express what you believe is the truth, what you think. And there are not, and it's also an interesting observation. What I saw was, there are a lot of people out there, I don't think really they speak the truth, their truth. However, then on the flip side, you have people out there where I generally believe, yeah, that's pretty authentic. They speak their truth. I would say, like, I would argue that an Alex Ramosi is one person, and also maybe a Jordan Peterson, or to a certain degree also Chris Williamson, the podcaster. And I think people really can recognize that in the way people speak, in their gesture, in their tonality, in their non-verbal expressions, like the communication that happens throughout with your face, with your hands, whatever. And I think that's just an interesting thing. And Dostoevsky also talks about, if you lie to yourself, you start like following your impulses. You become more impulsive. This is also something what I saw in myself back when I was young, when I was a teenager, maybe 18 years old. Like, I was way more impulsive on average when I was going out, and maybe to a certain degree lying to myself, like implicitly. And then like going out, drinking alcohol, partying a lot, maybe sleeping around. And that is like the lowest form of, that's really not good. And you are following your impulses. You are really training your brain to listen strongly to your impulses. However, when I started to work out again consistently, eat properly, sleep properly, maybe also take hot showers if we, and then things started to change, because if you master one thing, like you eat properly or you get good work done every single day, regardless of what you feel like, you train your impulse control. And there is like, I think Huberman talked about this in a podcast episode, there is like a certain brain area, and I unfortunately can't tell you the exact terminology from neurobiology, but the basic idea is, if you do something uncomfortable, like eating a healthy meal, but you actually want to eat junk food, or you go to sleep at a certain time, although you would like to watch another Netflix series, when you do that over and over again, there a certain area in your brain gets bigger and bigger. It's like a trainable muscle. It becomes bigger and bigger over time. And especially, or mainly, if you do stuff that you really are opposed to doing. Like, I'm going to work out, although I feel pretty tired. Or I take a cold shower, although I would prefer a hot shower. So this area in your brain gets stronger, and the cool thing is then really, if you master one thing, I would argue that translates into other areas of your life. At least this is what happened to me. I remember in 2019, the second semester during my undergrad time, I passed all exams plus an additional exam, so I worked quite hard. This was, and my main takeaway there was like, hey, if I work hard, I can get good results. And then later, in summer, I started again to work out consistently. I worked out already for a pretty long period before, but with some breaks. And from then on, I made a commitment I will work out basically till the end of my days, like till I die. At least that's my goal. And till today, I haven't stopped. I always work out 5 times per week. And my impulse control became stronger. Like there are many, many days obviously where I don't want to work out, but I'm still going. Main point I wanted to say, okay, I mastered one thing, passed all exam, then I started again working out. That worked out quite well. At the simultaneously starting to take care of my nutrition. After a certain period also I took care more of my sleep, like sleeping 8 hours at the same times, and so on and so forth. So it's really the compound interest effect that takes place here. You do one thing, then another thing, and everything, the entire life becomes better and better, and even at a faster pace. So, long story short, great quote by Dostoevsky. Next one. This is a post I wrote. A relationship's core is finding a game that both are willing to play. I think that was just a reminder to me that what Peterson was talking about, and I'm hugely paraphrasing, but it was something about in a relationship, maybe also to a certain degree, obviously in a friendship, it's about, hey, is there a game that both of us are willing to play? Is there a way like how we behave, how we speak, etc., that both people would feel comfortable with? Both people would feel more or less happy. And I think that's associated with that is a lot of negotiation and having hard conversations. There is also Peterson talking about, okay, you either have the option of ending a relationship or quitting a friendship, or you could have 1,000 hard conversations. I think that is one of the most powerful thing I came across in terms of relationships. Like, hey, it's always easier to say like, hey, fuck it, I give up. Or you could say like, I will have another 10, another 20, another 100 or even 1,000 hard conversations to figure out a game we are both willing to play. Because the grass is not greener on the other side. And that always, I think, in the moment, and another important framework here is to say if you're in a relationship, for instance, you're stuck with each other. There's no way out. You need to find a solution. And then it's like inherently or it comes naturally that, hey, you're having those 100 or even 1,000 hard conversations because you want to find a game that both are willing to play. Found it pretty inspiring, and especially nowadays where more and more people engage in short-term pleasure, I think that's something worth doing. And negotiating with each other and having the hard conversation, not going for the easy way out. All right, that's almost it for this week. Now I have one last bonus for you, or recommendation. So Chris Williamson just published today a podcast episode with Naval Ravikant. Naval Ravikant, as mentioned before, is the founder of AngelList. He's not only a pretty successful businessman, but also kind of a philosopher and has a pretty decent understanding what a good life can look like. Or at least he seems to be like a pretty content guy. And there is a podcast episode out called How to Get Rich. I'm listening to that podcast episode every single year. It's 3 hours long, 3 hours-ish long, and talks about the fundamental principles of wealth creation. It sounds like a little bit like catchy, like How to Get Rich, but it's way more than that. So that's one of the highest return things I think people can do is to simply listening to those 3 hours. How to Get Rich by Naval Ravikant. There's a podcast episode. There's also a blog post if you like reading it. Now, why I brought that up, there is a 3-hour podcast episode that Chris Williamson had a conversation with Naval. Highly recommend watching that. I haven't watched it yet, but I'm pretty sure it will be great. So I will watch that tonight. So I'm pretty much looking forward to it. That was just a little bonus, guys. I'm bringing that up because there are content pieces out there, or your books as well, that are just worth listening or reading over and over and over again until we have like put it into our DNA. Like, for instance, the 7 habits of highly effective people. If every single habit we put really into our day-to-day life, we live a pretty good life, I would assume. At least in my life, it worked out pretty well. And coming back to those habits, because we forget them, or at least in my case, like if I read a book, 90% of stuff I've forgotten. And to not forget it, I try to interrupt the forgetting curve with stuff like recording a podcast episode or like a summary episode and then uploading it here, like I did recently, or like taking notes or simply re-listening to it. And I'm currently also, I have a long list of 100 podcast episodes that had the biggest impact on my life, and re-listening those I think is so powerful, because there are certain pieces that they are still, although they are already 20 years old, in podcast episodes a little bit less, maybe 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 years old. But in terms of books, like, what's a good example? Man's Search for Meaning. I actually read it for the second or third time this year, or ended reading it this year. And there is so much wisdom in it. Like, I'm currently also rereading 12 Rules for Life by Jordan B. Peterson, a great book. There is so much wisdom inside this book. And the first time when I read it, I forgot most of it. The big rules, more or less, I had in my mind, but there are so many nuggets, gold nuggets within each chapter, within each rule he outlines. So I think it's definitely worth considering to come back to good stuff, and because we forget that stuff. All right, long story short, check out Naval Ravikant and Chris Williamson. I think you will love it. And thanks for listening to this podcast. Maybe one quick last note. If you liked Elon Musk's framework or similar concepts, I have a newsletter called Zenith Sunday. Each Sunday, basically, I write a free newsletter, and I share simple lessons I learn about doing better work and living a better life in it. So it's short, easy to read, costs nothing. And if you would like a little boost each week, you can sign up below. And now, thanks for listening, and talk soon.